Spanning over 60 miles, it is the widest river in the world. It has been described as a river of grass. It comprises the lower third of the Florida peninsula. This wonderland of life, this subtropical paradise, nurtures the soul. It is the Everglades.
With regards to Everglades National Park, you can't help but recognize that this is a superlative park in many different ways. We talked about the fact that it protects the largest sawgrass stand in North America. It preserves the largest dwarf cypress prairie in North America. It preserves the largest coastal mangrove forest in the Northern Hemisphere, the largest wilderness area east of the Rocky Mountains, an estuary of national significance in Florida Bay, and what's often overlooked is that it preserves cultural resources, evidence of human use and habitation going back at least 10,000 years, if not more. It is an amazing remnant of an amazing ecosystem in many regards.
The Everglades is a fountain of renewal, a refuge, a place to rekindle our most basic instincts as part of the world and the sphere of biology. I get that when I come to the Everglades. I get that when I come to any natural area, really. But the Everglades is my backyard. It's what I know the most. It's what I love. It's what I study. And it's where I come to have fun, to be intellectually quiet, and to be emotionally stimulated.
The beauty of the Everglades is a quiet beauty. A beauty born of water. There is no place on the planet like the Everglades. It is where two great biomes of life meet: the tropical and the temperate mid-latitude, which makes up much of the continental United States. Plants and animals from each coalesce in the Everglades to produce a subtropical tapestry of ecosystems that is unmatched anywhere in the world. It all starts with rain. Life-giving rain. Water that is first destined to become a river, lush with flora. Along this river, there are no rushing currents, no tumbling rapids, no sheer cascading falls. Nonetheless, it is a river that moves tirelessly. As it moves, it passes through Sawgrass Prairies. Prairies as vast as the eye can see. Prairies that conceal the slow-moving water below. It may linger in a small pond dug out by the park's ubiquitous alligators. Some of the water will enter the network of man-made sloughs and canals crisscrossing the Everglades, and then move on again. Perhaps flowing into one of the larger lakes. Lakes teeming with bird life beyond imagination. And where is all this water going? It is always moving towards the ocean, moving at the unhurried pace of 100 feet per day. Finally, the water enters the mangroves, a special place where unique plants thrive between the worlds of freshwater and saltwater. The waters here are the cradle of life, the nursery for the rich resources of the ocean. Then, at last, the water that started as an afternoon thunderstorm has found its final destination. It's home among the 10,000 islands in Florida Bay. The Everglades is best known for its unique wildlife. Its freshwater crocodilian, the American alligator. The manatee, a large but gentle mammal that lives most of its life beneath the waters of the Everglades. And what many come to see, the incredible bird populations that inhabit its rivers, lakes, ponds, and sloughs. To understand why all this wildlife thrives here, you have to understand the forces that shaped the Everglades. Its climate and its geology. Just a few feet above sea level, the slightest change in elevation can have a dramatic impact on which ecosystem can flourish in any given area. The geology that helped produce these conditions goes far back in time. Ranger Leon Howell leads nature walks in Everglades National Park.
This landscape looks flat to you, but it's not. If it was totally flat, it would look nothing like it does today. We see that very patchiness that I talked about, this mosaic of contrasting plant community standing here. Tree line over there, tropical hardwood forest. Tree lines in the distance, hardwood forest and bay heads, swamp forest. An open prairie, a willow strand over here. You are looking at topography. So let's account for that topography. 100,000 years ago, sea levels were higher and there was a shallow sea here. And in that sea, there were some broad features. There was a deeper area, shallow bay, looked very much like Florida Bay today. There was a big ridge of sand, small calcium carbonate particles. I like to call it an oolitic ridge that ran from downtown Miami into the park. That was cut by tidal channels. Ocean side of that was a fringing reef, very much like today. Well, about 80,000 years ago, the planet started to cool off again, and the glaciers grew and advanced. And much of the water in the ocean was used to build the glaciers, so sea levels went way down, as much as 300 to 400 feet, 120 meters. Florida was nothing like it is today. And those sediments that were left by that ancient sea were now exposed to rain and to air, and they returned to stone. Preserved in that stone were the contours of that ocean bottom. And while the rock was exposed, it was eroded. Not by raging rivers or waterfalls, mechanical erosion, but chemically. Limestone, the rock that we see along here, is easily dissolved in acids. Rainfall is acidic. So given tens of thousands of years, superimposed on those broad features of that ancient ocean are holes and high spots and ridges. Well, about 18,000 years ago, the planet started to warm back up. Again, the last in a handful of times over the last few million years, and the glaciers started to melt, and sea levels started to rebound. They came up really fast for a while, 6 to 7 feet, 2 meters a century. Nothing like that's happening today, but the Everglades wasn't here. It was dry and windy and cool. But the rock of the Everglades was in place. The bone, the literal ground floor. The first actor in the drama just walked out on the stage. Guys, it was just 5,000 years ago, and I blink, talking geologically, when the modern climate started to arrive. When the oldest of the ancient Egyptian pyramids were being built, this landscape was just beginning to form in its present form. Now we have seasonal water across this landscape of subtle topography. The deep spots in that ancient shallow sea are now our low spots, and they stay wet most of the time. The shallower spots in that ancient sea are now our high spots, and they stay dry most of the time. And the places that are in between, like this prairie, are wet in the summer and dry in the winter for varying periods. That much difference in elevation, and I'm only talking a range of about 1.5 meters, 4 or 5 feet. That much difference in elevation can make the difference between being wet 10 months a year and 4 months a year. Now, what grows where it's wet doesn't grow where it's dry. Plant communities that like to be wet a little bit don't do well where it's wet a lot, and vice versa. So when we look at this patchwork of contrasting plant communities, we are looking at topography. The vast majority of it, the result of geology, either the shape of the ancient ocean or subsequent erosion.
But geology alone is not responsible for the diversity of ecosystems in the Everglades. In all of the vast continental United States, only South Florida possesses a year-round warm tropical climate. Another major force in shaping the Everglades. Larry Perez is a park ranger and has lived his whole adult life in South Florida.
This place really is tropical in nature, and because of that, we have very distinct cycles of wet and dry. 6 months out of the year, we experience a tremendous amount of rainfall, usually corresponding with our summer months, wherein we get approximately 60 inches of rain falling on this landscape. When we move into the fall and into the winter months, that rainfall disappears almost altogether. We're at the tail end of our dry season right now, where we get perhaps 1, 2, 3 inches of rain annually. Those are two really extreme conditions between flood and drought, and it's that constant, dependable cycle between high water and low water that really fuels the abundance of life in this area. That hydrologic cycle is the engine that makes this place operate. During the summer months, when there's a constant amount of rainfall falling on the landscape every day, the prairies are filled with water, but as the dry season moves week by week and month by month, that water level will begin to dissipate and drop. The fish, invertebrates, crustaceans that occupy that water move themselves into the areas that retain water the longest. The mobile species in the freshwater marsh will congregate then within those pools. Things like birds, alligators that depend on that food source will move into those pools and migrate between them as the water level continues to drop. So at the tail end of the winter months, you'll find individual pools remaining in the Everglades just teeming with wildlife, somewhat like an Animal Planet special in real life.
In a most dramatic way, another force is shaping the Everglades. Its keystone species, the American alligator. Perhaps nowhere else does a single species act like a geographic and biologic force of nature on its own.
Well, guys, now that we've seen some alligators, we want to talk about them a little bit. Some fun stuff first. They belong to an order of animals, a group of animals called the crocodilians. That's 21 or 23 species, some say 24, really doesn't matter. We have 2 crocodilians in this park. We know we got alligators because we just seen some. Who knows what the other one is? The American saltwater crocodile. A lot of people want to know the difference, so briefly, crocodile has a much more tapered snout than the alligator. Pointed. Alligators are black. I don't care how many cartoons you've seen all your life that show them as green. Adults are black, at least on their backs. Crocodiles, on the other hand, are sort of a dark olive gray, and when their mouths are shut, they still look really, really toothy. Particularly that lower tooth that protrudes upward on the outside of the upper jaw, characteristic of all 12 species of crocodiles. Alligator, on the other hand, when its mouth is shut, it doesn't look near as toothy, and if you see any teeth at all, it's top ones pointing down. The biggest difference between these two animals, guys, is where they live. The crocodile is a tropical animal, and it lives on both coasts of Mexico, Cuba, top of South America, Hispaniola, Jamaica, and extreme South Florida. Now, this animal likes estuaries, a mixture of fresh and salt, so it's limited to coastlines and river mouths. Now, being tropical and liking coastlines, it's only seen in this country along the coast of extreme South Florida. The alligator, on the other hand, is everywhere else. Now, we like to think of the alligator as representative of the crocodilians in this country, I guess because we're used to them, but they're not. They're the oddball, the black sheep, the contrarian. When somebody told all the crocodilians to sit down, the alligator stood up. Kind of like I was when I was a kid, if y'all hadn't figured that out yet, and I'm still a little bit like that today. It is the only one as a species that's not rooted in the tropics. It lives in coastal North and South Carolina, Georgia, North Florida, Alabama, Mississippi. Everybody knows they're in Louisiana, but how about Arkansas, southeastern Oklahoma, and Texas, where it gets below freezing routinely? The alligator is not a tropical animal. It's a warm, temperate animal, and it's the only crocodilian that's that way. Now, serious note. Alligators roll in this landscape. Back to these forces that shape this place. When I was a kid in the late 50s and early 60s, you could not come out here and see alligators like you do today. They were almost gone. They were on the endangered list. They are being turned into belts, shoes and boots, handbags, almost quicker than they could make copies of themselves. And the biologists of the day were asking, what is the Everglades going to do without the alligator? Well, I didn't know what they meant then, but I do today. The alligator is an aquatic animal. Now, I've talked about the seasonal coming and goings of the water here. What do you suppose an alligator is going to do if he doesn't have a cool pond like this close by? Because they don't go far. When his stomach hits the dirt in January, he's got to have water. What's he going to do? They dig. It's not like they decide it's time to dig, but as the water falls, they're forced to lower and lower spots. When the water disappears, they excavate a hole. Water's never very deep in South Florida. Call it what you want to. You're looking at the water table. So the alligator's got his water now, and around the edges, he's piled up debris. So it's higher and drier and disturbed. That's important. A lot of animals in this landscape have to have water in the dry season, but they can't dig holes. They fill that hole up. Fish, frogs, and turtles. This place is like a big gator hole, really, in the dry season. So the alligators just created habitat that's important for many animals in the dry season. And around the edges, where it's higher and drier, the plant community changes. It's usually ringed by willow trees. We call them willow heads. You see them driving down the road. So the alligator has actually contributed to the botanical diversity of this landscape, the very patchiness that I described, the very way this place looks. If that's not enough for you, in the dry season, they keep creeks open. Remember that trough through that old canal? They keep game trails open. They're like bulldozers going through the landscape. And that's what the biologists meant when they asked, what is the Everglades going to do without the alligator?
The last major force in shaping the Everglades landscape is fire.
Fire is a vital component of this ecosystem for the simple fact that here in South Florida, you are in the lightning strike capital of North America. We have more annually than anywhere else in the country. Just given that fact alone, you can probably already process that wildfire is a natural component in the ecosystem. Some ecosystems here are built to burn. They're meant to burn. They need to burn in order to remain healthy and viable. The pine rockland ecosystems we talked about is one good example. Even the wide open sawgrass prairies, even when inundated with water, will sometimes burn right across the surface. It's an ecosystem that needs fire to survive. For the most part, when fires occur naturally in the right time of year, we'll allow those fires to burn out, provided that we're able to protect visitors and visitor facilities as well as park facilities. But we recognize that fire is a natural component of the ecosystem.
After the alligator, the second signature species of the Everglades is the West Indian manatee. It is a mammal that is fully adapted to an aquatic life. Like whales and dolphins, they have lost their hind legs. The average West Indian manatee is approximately 10 feet long and weighs between 800 to 1,200 pounds. The manatee's color, which is gray or brown, can be viewed as they rise up from the depths of the water to breathe the air, or as they move gracefully along river channels. And again, like whales and dolphins, they have flippers. Flippers, which in their case, allow them to hold vegetation as they are eating.
They concentrate in the south, around Florida in the wintertime. In the summertime, they will go up the east coast. They are a large herbivorous mammal. They're fairly long-lived. Although they are marine mammals, they do go up rivers for fresh water. They have to drink fresh water. There's not too many places where you can predictably see them, but in North Florida, north of Tampa, in places like Manatee Springs State Park, Crystal River, the water coming out of those rivers, those spring-fed rivers, in the wintertime is warmer than the water in the ocean. Well, those marine mammals, being tropical, they want that warmth, so they'll all come up those rivers into those springs. Down here, they stay spread out. But the Gulf Coast areas between Flamingo and up in Everglades City contains a lot of manatees. Today they're estimating maybe 3,000 manatees, maybe even more than that, which is a bigger number than they used to say. Their only natural enemy really is the outboard motor and boats.
The final signature species of the Everglades is more elusive and less well known. For the endangered wood stork, a true stork, the Everglades has become its last line of defense. A defense against extinction. Once found in enormous rookeries numbering in the tens of thousands, their numbers have been dramatically reduced by agricultural and urban development. Still roosting in colonies, they breed in the cypress swamps and mangroves of the Everglades. Interestingly, during the breeding season, wood storks need over 400 pounds of fish to feed themselves and their offspring. Wood storks are members of the most impressive part of the Everglades bird population. A group of birds called long-legged waders. The largest of these wading birds is the great blue heron. Here, motionlessly waiting for its prey, it is an elegant bird with a blue-gray back, a gray and white striped belly. Its long neck is gray with a black-bordered white throat stripe. Amber eyes set in a black-crested head are ever searching for a frog or small fish. There is nothing more striking than a large white wading bird standing against the background of dark green vegetation. The Everglades contains two such birds. One is the great white heron, a bird unique to Florida. A bird which turns out to be a white version of the great blue heron. The second of these large white wading birds is the great egret, also known as the American egret. It is a bird that has adapted well to human habitation and can readily be seen near wetlands and bodies of water, even in urban and suburban areas throughout the country. The Everglades also contains a number of smaller herons and egrets. This group of smaller wading birds includes the cattle egret, which, unlike its water-based cousins, feeds in relatively dry sedge or grassy habitats, eating small insects. Also white in color is the white ibis. With its down-curved beak and red face, it feeds mostly on the ever-present crayfish in the Everglades. A monogamous species, it breeds in large tree colonies. There are also two fascinating wading birds that can be seen wintering in the Everglades.
You see two birds along this trail, particularly in the winter, that look alike and behave alike. The Doublecrested Cormorant, a widespread bird in North America. If you got water by your house in a lake or a river, you see those cormorants. And the anhinga. They look alike, they behave alike, they need deep water to swim to catch fish. That's where the similarities end. The cormorant is a temperate species. The anhinga is a tropical species with a slow metabolism, and its feathers have a microstructure that allow it to get wet to the skin. Now, what do you think a tropical bird with a slow metabolism that gets wet to the skin is in danger of? Cold, hypothermia. We see a lot of birds that spread their wings in the sun, and they do it for a lot of reasons. Sunlight kills germs. It makes parasites move so the birds can remove them. Maybe it just feels good. When we see an anhinga spreading its wings, he got something else up his sleeve. Has a specific purpose, and that's to elevate its body temperature. When we use the energy of the environment to change our body temperature, we call that thermoregulation. We normally associated it with cold-blooded animals, not birds. But the anhinga, he's doing more than drying off, and it has nothing to do with oil in the feathers. It's the structure of the feathers.
Perhaps the most stunning wading bird in the Everglades is the Roseate Spoonbill. Brilliant pink with a white neck and orange tail, it is often confused with the flamingo, which is a rare inhabitant of the Everglades. These spectacular birds spend much of their time in the tidal waters of Florida Bay and in the shallows of freshwater lakes, feeding on small crustaceans, which give them their pink color. Once hunted to near extinction by plume hunters, their numbers are increasing again in the protective sanctuaries of the Everglades. These sanctuaries also contain two species of pelicans. one a year-round resident and the other migratory. Forming a long line, wings beating, soaring in unison, the flights of the white pelican are a majestic sight. The white pelican is a very large and plump bird. Its overall length is about 50 to 67 inches, and it has a wingspan of nearly 10 feet. It feeds by gliding along the water, scooping up fish in its huge beak, which measures over a foot in length. Not so for the brown pelican. A year-round resident of the Everglades, it dives for its food. Its dark brown body dive bombing into the ocean is a spectacular sight. The dominant bird of prey in the Everglades, and the one visitors are most likely to see nesting and hunting, is the osprey.
So for Everglades National Park, the osprey is the second largest bird of prey next to the bald eagle. It has a 63-inch wingspan, and it typically takes about 23 days for the egg to hatch. And then right around 11 weeks, the baby bird is the exact same size as mom and dad. About the 12-week mark, they're already flying on their own, just like most of the ospreys out here. Babies will have little white spots on their wings, and the adults will have more of a solid brown wing. The babies are also darker in color. And they also say the unique thing about an osprey is that they're known to mate for life. They've done studies on the osprey. The same two osprey came back to the same nest for 21 years in a row. The osprey's main food will be just fish, mainly mullet here. The mullet swim real close to the top and live in shallow waters, easy for the osprey to grab. The osprey will be able to dive underwater up to about 3 feet and grab a fish with its talons. And it does have a reversible thumb, so the head of the fish will go towards the head of the osprey in flight for aerodynamics.
The second most common bird of prey a visitor is likely to encounter in the Everglades is a much smaller raptor, the red-shouldered hawk. This hawk hunts by sitting quietly on lower perches, overlooking the park's many wetlands, waiting for a snake or frog to emerge. Nearby lurks a vulture. Indeed, look up into the sky and one is most likely to see at any given time vultures circling lazily in search of carrion. Sometimes called a buzzard, it is a bird with a wingspan equal to that of an eagle. It is also a bird that gathers together in rookeries in the evening.
We have two species, turkey vultures and black vultures, and we have both year-round. But like a lot of birds that come south in the winter, the population of those vultures really grows in the wintertime. They're on their way back north now. They like this place for the same reason the other animals do, because this is where the food is. And you got to say, well, they're not a wading bird, they're not catching fish. That's true, but there's lots of biological activity here. There's alligators tearing up fish, there's wading birds that get a fish that's too big to eat, they discard it, that's where the vultures come in.
Depending on the time of year, we can often find black and turkey vultures, both species here, year-round. They're residential, really, but you tend to see a lot more of them a little later on in the dry season for a very simple reason. We've talked about the importance of that hydrologic cycle, wet to dry, and the drawdown that occurs in the park. There's a point every winter during the dry season when water levels drop sufficiently and there's enough prey congregated within those remnant water that dissolved oxygen in there is no longer sufficient to support all the wildlife crowded into those little puddles. And when that happens, for lack of oxygen, many of those fish species will simply go belly up. This happens almost every year to one degree or another, and those vultures, again, are timed with the cycles here. They know that if they stick around long enough in the dry season, there's sushi for everybody.
Another of the animal groups that congregate in these shrinking water refuges during the dry season are turtles. Turtles are reptiles that are uniquely adapted to life in the water. One kind has adapted to fresh water, the other to the ocean's salt water.
Marine turtles are totally different animals. They spend their entire life, except when they lay eggs, in the ocean. Water turtles here spend a lot of their life in the water, but they also climb out on the land a lot to bask in the sun, and they lay their eggs in the mud banks. And they cannot tolerate salt water. So we have a marine turtle with flippers, no feet, and we have freshwater aquatic turtles that are not as well adapted to water, I guess, as a sea turtle. They don't have to spend as much time in the water, so they have regular feeding claws. They are distinctly different. Both turtles, totally different life cycles, totally different habitats.
Habitats in the Everglades can be laid out graphically in an idealized way like this. Starting at the ocean, there are the marine and estuary habitats, tidal flats and sand beaches. Rising up slightly, we find the mangrove forests. Next are the treeless sawgrass prairies. Slightly higher in elevation are the savanna-like dwarf cypress forests. Next, growing on more substantial soils, are the slash pine forests. And growing on the highest elevations and richest soils are the cypress forests, sometimes called hardwood hammocks. The hardwood hammock is what most people think of as a jungle. It is a densely forested area, dominated at eye level by saw palmettos and large cabbage palm fronds. Sometimes called sable palm, the cabbage palm is the state tree of Florida and South Carolina. The hardwood cypress forests are found growing in the Everglades in large, natural, circular patches and long, linear configurations called strands, which parallel man-made drainage ditches.
This is a state preserve. They're trying to preserve the old growth cypress in this area. It's about 75,000 acres. And the Fat-Catchy Strand was historically a long, linear, north-south grove of cypress trees. And in the background here, some of the local vegetation, the tall palm tree with the silver trunk is the royal palm. And behind it, to the right, the dark green tree is the cypress tree, the local to this area. Also here, there are a lot of tropical hardwoods. Gumbo limbo, the one with the green and copper colored bark. is a common one you'll see here.
Entering an old-growth cypress forest. There is nothing quite like it. Standing like sentinels guarding a fortress, the bald cypress trees harken back to a time 65 million years ago, a primeval time dominated by dinosaurs. Only today, it's alligators. The majestic old-growth bald cypress can reach 600 years in age. And grow to heights exceeding 130 feet. It all starts as organic soils accumulate in various parts of the Everglades. Now, trees begin to have an advantage over the wetland plants, such as the plentiful sedges. Young cypresses begin to grow. Eventually, as they grow taller, cypress trees begin to rely for stability on an extensive system of horizontal roots. Roots that send up twisted outgrowths called knees. Knees, along with the swelling at the base of the tree, provide the extra support necessary in the wet, loose soil to survive strong winds and the constant storms and hurricanes that yearly race across the Everglades. Eventually, natural cavities in the older cypress trees provide homes for downy woodpeckers. Epiphytic air plants, such as red bromeliads, grow on the trunks. And because the cypresses lose their needles for several months during the winter, light can filter down to the forest floor, enabling a rich diversity of understory plants to thrive. Ferns colonize fallen trees and cypress knees. Hardwood trees and cabbage palms take advantage of breaks in the canopy. And the regal royal palm lords over it all. It is truly one of the most enchanting ecosystems in the world. There are no other Everglades in the world. The miracle of the light pours over the green and brown expanse of sawgrass and of water. Shining and slow-moving below, the grass and water that is the meaning and the central fact of the Everglades of Florida. It is a river of grass. So wrote Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the spiritual founder of the Everglades Park System. The Sawgrass Prairie is the iconic ecosystem of the Everglades. It is best described by a feeling of awe. impenetrable expanses of water and plants. An early American poet wrote, "Not gold, not silver, but green." Tropical breezes set the sawgrass to sway. O'er miles of flat prairie, a study of greens. Valuable? The Spanish explorers dismissed it, named it for the Holy Spirit, moved on. It is through the Sawgrass Prairie that the life-giving water of the Everglades slowly works its way to the sea. Dominated by a single species of plant, the Sawgrass Prairie is a monoculture, low in biological diversity. Nevertheless, the soil beneath the blades of green swaying in the tropical sun forms the basis for the entire food chain in the Everglades. Interestingly, the dominant species in the Sawgrass Prairie is not a grass at all, but a sedge. Sedges have edges. The way to tell the difference between a sedge and a grass is to move your fingers up and down on one of the plant's blades. In the case of a sedge, you'll instantly feel the edges, whereas a grass blade will be flat and smooth. And if you look at the flowers of each, you can see that they form totally different plant families. One of the more fascinating features nestled in the heart of the Sawgrass Prairies are those abundant alligator holes. Small ponds with a sudden and dramatic diversity of life. Cattails, snakes, a plethora of insects, a rich fauna of fish, and of course, alligators.
We consider, of all the wildlife out here, the alligators to be the keystone species in the freshwater Everglades. And keystone meaning that their presence in the Everglades really has importance beyond just their individual selves. Alligators have a very unique habit of dealing with that drop in the water level. They'll actually, when conditions get just right and dry enough, they'll take their massive bodies, move them back and forth in the marsh, move their snouts back and forth in the marsh, and excavate large holes into the mud and marl beneath. And what they're basically doing is digging a swimming pool that, because of our water table being so close to the surface, will instantly get filled up with water. Anything that depends on that water for its survival, again, fish, snails, invertebrates, crayfish, will move into that pond, as will the alligator. And that pond will serve not only to provide refuge to those aquatic species for the duration of the remaining dry season, but it'll also provide refuge to the alligator, who then has a living buffet that he can pick off as the season progresses.
It is during the time of the alligator ponds, in May and June, that alligators mate and lay eggs. The female builds a nest on shore and lays 35 to 50 eggs. These eggs incubate for 65 days and then hatch into 6-inch baby alligators. Baby alligators stay with their mother for approximately 2 years. During that time, they are growing about 1 foot a year. They reach sexual maturity when they arrive at the 10-year mark and are about 6 feet in length. In the wild, alligators live for up to 50 years each of those years following the ebb and flow of the water cycle in the Sawgrass Prairies. But not all sawgrass prairies are totally barren of trees. Some are ecologically on the move, moving to the next ecosystem, the dwarf cypress forest. Looking much like an African savanna, the tiny trees of the dwarf cypress forest are actually the normal cypress, only stunted in their growth due to poor soil conditions. Not stunted at all is the slash pine that dominates the canopy of the Rockland pine forest. It is here that the visitor is most likely to see the southern white-tailed deer.
It surprises a lot of people when they come here into the Everglades that they'll drive down the main park road and in an area that for the most part looks like a giant swamp, they all of a sudden happen upon a huge stand of pine forest right here in the heart of the park. That is a significant parcel of the park for the simple reason that that pineland that you see here in Everglades National Park is the southernmost extent of a forest system that ranged all the way up the coast along a geologic feature called the Atlantic Coastal Ridge, a slightly higher ridge in elevation than the surrounding area. Historically, we had pine trees like those growing all along what is today US 1 all the way up to the county line. And over time, because of their higher elevation, those areas were cleared first for development. What we have here in Everglades National Park is the single largest remnant stand of that pine forest.
Although these pine trees or slash pines that you see throughout the southeast, the mix of plants here, the part tropical, part temperate understory, and the fact that that plant community grows right out of the limestone is unique. It is the most botanically diverse habitat in the park. More kinds of plants there than anywhere else. And it is mostly gone. That was the high ground. We built Miami on the high ground. There's a little pine rockland in the Keys, there's a little in the Cuba, a little in the Bahamas, but the patch that's here is only 10% of what was here historically. It is considered a globally imperiled habitat, our pine rockland.
Elements of nature can often astound visually. The mangroves are one such aspect of nature. In their holistic form, they reveal their complex beauty through fascinating details. Details that are ever varying in their complex shapes and structures.
Mangroves, that refers to trees, not necessarily a species, but a kind of tree that can tolerate soil without oxygen, that's wet, and is full of salt. You only see them along the coast in the tidal areas, and we have one of the best developed and largest mangrove forests on the planet right here in Everglades National Park. It runs almost 100 miles unbroken from Naples down around the bottom of Florida. Much of that mangrove forest that existed along the east coast, Miami, is gone because we built the city. It is not as botanically diverse as many places, but as far as the amount of biomass that's produced per acre per year, it is one of the richest habitats on Earth in a well-developed mature mangrove forest. In other words, If you took everything out of a square acre of mangrove forest that lived and died in a year, and we're talking lots of microorganisms, you'd need more 5-gallon buckets than any other place on the planet. So an extremely rich habitat. It is the nursery ground for most of our commercially and recreationally important marine species, lobsters, crabs, and fish.
Mike Hatcher is a naturalist who guides boat tours through the dense and eerie mangrove swamps. He is intimately familiar with the 3 species of mangrove trees that comprise the forest: the black, white, and dominant red mangrove.
So the red mangrove tree is about 60 to 70% of the trees out here, and they're the ones with the big arching hoop-shaped root. And how they're going to deal with the salt water out here is by using something called reverse osmosis. What they'll do is block out about 90% of the salt right at the roots, and then the remaining 10% of the salt will go up into the oldest dying leaf. That leaf will turn yellow, then fall off into the water, starting tannins, which will stain the water here brown. Also, it'll start the beginning of the food chain, which little bitty microorganisms will start growing on that leaf, and then shrimp and crab will start feeding off of that, so on and so on, all the way up to the sharks, dolphins, and us. And then white and black mangroves can deal with the salt by using their root systems. They'll actually take all the salt provided to them right into the tree. It'll go up into the tree and then excrete itself through the backside of the leaves. The black mangroves has something on the root system called a pneumatophore. What that is, it looks like little sticks that'll stick up out of the mud, and that'll help it exchange gases. So as a high tide comes in and floods over the root system, those pneumatophores will act as snorkels. And then the white mangrove tree has a regular tree-style trunk and then a regular mandarin root, which can't survive long periods of time in that water just because it wouldn't be able to breathe like a normal tree.
Flying over Florida Bay, it is literally dotted with hundreds of islands, all supporting mangrove forests. On the beaches of these islands exists a wonderful micro-ecosystem. Seaweed dancing in the gentle oceanic waves. There are many forms of seaweed. Seaweed is actually a common term for a group of multicellular marine algae found throughout the world's oceans. The beach itself is rich with tiny crabs and a variety of seashells, while the bay contains resident pods of sleek bottlenose dolphins. Below flourishes a glorious abundance of life. Fish, sharks, coral, and sea turtles. All 5 species of sea turtles found in the Everglades National Park are in trouble. The leatherback, Kemp's ridley, and hawksbill are critically endangered. The olive ridley and green sea turtles are endangered. Green sea turtles are named for the greenish color of their body fat. Up to 2,000 nests of this enchanting reptile can be found in Florida each year. For centuries, turtles like these were hunted for their meat and made into soup. As a result of hunting and egg gathering, their numbers have been reduced to dangerous levels. Green sea turtles graze on the vast beds of seaweed found throughout the tropics. and are the only sea turtles that eat plants. Some travel over 1,000 miles to nest here. Their sighting is a final punctuation on any journey through the vast diversity of the Everglades ecosystems. The Everglades network of ecosystems, just a few hundred years ago, covered half of the Florida peninsula. It extended from present-day Orlando down to Lake Okeechobee, where it became the River of Grass. That wide body of water, slowly moving down to Florida Bay. Archaeological evidence has revealed that there was human habitation in the Everglades dating back to the last ice age.
And the Native Americans that we've had here, the history of the area has been very profound. There are resources in this park that indicate that we've had occupation here for a minimum of 10,000 years, perhaps even longer than that, by the Paleo-Indians. Their ancestors to this day, the Miccosukee and the Seminole, maintain tight ties to this area, and especially given the fact that during the campaigns of the First, Second, and Third Seminole War, as they were forced further and further down the state under threat of violence, they found refuge in this landscape, which up until that time was relatively unknown by their white pursuers. And they remember that to this day.
The Three Seminole Wars were a conflict that began in 1870 and lasted on and off until 1858. The First War began in 1817, when General Andrew Jackson invaded Florida with 4,200 men to stop the Seminole Indians from attacking American settlers. In 1835, when asked to sign documents demanding the Seminoles leave for Indian territory in present-day Oklahoma, a young war chief, Osceola, let the assembly know his thoughts on immigration. "The only treaty I will ever execute will be this." With that, Osceola plunged a knife into the treaty on the negotiating table. His heroic act led to his people carrying on the fight, taking refuge in Florida's Everglades, and never surrendering. Osceola's descendants still live in the Everglades today. However, the first Europeans to set foot in the Everglades were members of a Spanish expedition led by conquistador and explorer Ponce de Leon. In May of 1513, he explored a number of the islands in Florida Bay. The land was so beautiful that Ponce de Leon named it La Florida in honor of the Easter Sunday known as Pascua de Florida, Feast of Flowers. His expedition began a 500-year European-American history in the Everglades.
When you take a look at a map of Everglades National Park, what's notable is that if you look at all the different place names in the park, they harken back to cultures as disparate as the English, the Spanish, the French, African, and even Native American. So we know that this place has been important to a wide diversity of people over time. In the case of the English, some of our earliest maps come from the explorers and the surveyors that were here at the time. As far as the Spanish, some of the earliest explorers like Ponce de Leon have actually christened some of the places in Everglades National Park. We've had immigrants here from Spain, we have immigrants here from France over the time. Escaped slaves. We know that Everglades National Park is part of the Underground Railroad here in South Florida. Some slaves, former slaves, escaped to freedom through areas of Everglades National Park today.
But as the 20th century dawned, developers began to view the Everglades as potential farmland and as a place for urban communities. As a result, a massive drainage process began, unwittingly damaging the Everglades ecosystems and the species it supports. However, at the same time, the American conservation movement grew into a national effort, and the Everglades began drawing the attention of the Audubon Society. Its members wanted to put an end to the plume hunters, men who hunted the Everglades' exotic bird life simply for their colorful tail feathers used in ladies' hats. As a result of this attention, people began to recognize that the Everglades was a remarkable, one-of-a-kind ecosystem, not just a swamp to be drained. Then, in 1928, Florida landscape architect Ernest Coe began a concentrated effort to designate a tropical Everglades National Park. His persistence paid off when he and others persuaded Congress to designate the Everglades as a national park in 1934. It took park supporters another 13 years to acquire land and secure funding for the official opening of the park in 1947 by President Harry S. Truman. Joining in the celebration was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas really earned fame because of her book River of Grass, which again portrayed a landscape that up until that point was really misunderstood. She did a phenomenal job of not only exposing the natural history of the area, but also the human history of the area. And it's perhaps fitting that her book in 1947 debuted the same year that the park was dedicated. But Marjorie didn't stop with the book. Later in life, she would actually found Friends of the Everglades, a pretty notable conservation organization that continues to be in existence today. And she founded that in recognition of the fact that Everglades National Park could not persist as an island, but rather was influenced by all the activities taking place outside of it. And her organization aimed to make that activity outside the park conducive to its health and well-being in perpetuity.
A big part of preserving the Everglades in perpetuity was the initiation of the largest ecosystem restoration effort the world has ever undertaken. Linda Fryer is a researcher and land management policy expert.
The thing about this ecosystem, and there are many ecosystems in trouble around the planet, is to see how you are able to bring various jurisdictions together, look at the policy conflicts, and try and work through those so that the resource isn't impacted by process and bureaucracy. And we're a state, we're a nation, we're a city, we're a county, we're different tribal nations. How do we come together with one target on the wall is to protect this resource? And Everglades is really a prime example of that. I think you'll see that happening across the country. Great Lakes maybe, Chesapeake Bay, other places around the world, bringing all the jurisdictions who are responsible for land holdings to better preserve and protect these resources for future generations.
Today, the Everglades is preserved by a number of private sanctuaries, state parks and research stations, and 2 big federal government holdings: Big Cypress National Preserve, and of course, the Everglades National Park itself. Parks and preserves that can be experienced in a number of ways by visitors. Driving in your car, stop and observe an alligator or a bird colony along the roadway or from a turnout. The more adventurous can explore the Everglades waterways through kayaking and canoe trips. And there are a variety of guided boat tours.
Most of the opportunities to take boat tours throughout the park are concession managed, which is a company that goes through a process to be licensed through the park. We make sure that the messaging that they're delivering is according to park management guidelines. You can take boat tours in Everglades City, which is closer to Naples, boat tours out of Flamingo, which is closer to Miami, and there are airboat tours off of Tamiami Trail. Those are not park concessions at this point in time. They're operated in an area that was added to the park in 1989, and that contracting effort is still underway. But they are in the park, and they do a pretty good job of getting close to 500,000 visitors out into the park from those areas.
Perhaps the most spectacular way to view the Everglades is by air. Lastly, there are a number of strategically placed boardwalks and trails that take the visitor right out into the Everglades. Boardwalk adventures that can be self-guided or led by an interpretive park ranger.
We're going to talk about that rock. And I ask, why do we come to these places? I bet everybody here likes parks. It's a good bet that you do because you're here. Whether it's a little city park with an old church and big trees where you live, or a grand national park like this, we like them. We get something of personal value. There is a reservoir of experience that we tap when we come to our parks. We have our straws in that reservoir right now, every one of us, and we're drinking. Now it's different in the Grand Canyon than it is here, but I suspect the personal buttons that are pushed in you are largely the same from place to place. The spectrum may be shifted a bit in the Grand Canyon compared to here. It's turquoise out there and blue here. What's coming through the straw that's in the reservoir may taste a bit different to you here than in the Great Smoky Mountains, but a similar flavor, your own flavor. When we lose a park, little one or big one, we simply lose the color of the rainbow. There is a flavor we will never again taste. I'm reminded by a quote by a Miccosukee Indian who was working some decades ago with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas on Everglades preservation issues, and he says, you can't make it, you can't buy it, and when it's gone forever.